Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be on the planet. My name is Grant Cameron, and this is an episode of what I call Conversations about UFOs. I've been a researcher for almost 40 years. I've done a number of interviews with various people in the UFO community, and I've got them stacked in cassette cases and all over the place. And what I decided to do is just record some of the interviews that I do with various people and put them out for everybody to hear. My guest that I'm interviewing this morning, and actually it's evening for my guest, is Robert Fleischer, who I've always known as the German UFO guy. I first met Robert a number of years ago at one of Steve Bassett's X conferences, and Robert was there with his TV camera, and he looks a bit like a Hollywood movie star. He was running around with his camera, interviewing a bunch of people. I've known him since then, and we've had sort of interactions on various stories. And Robert came up with a story, an FOIA story, and I'd done a number of investigations on Freedom of Information Act requests in the United States. And so I wanted to talk to Robert, and we're recording this because Robert has a story dealing with the Freedom of Information Act in Germany. And he's also got a couple other things that I want to sort of question him about related to UFOs. So I'd like to welcome Robert to my little conversation here this morning, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Hello, Robert?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. You heard my intro?
Yes, I heard it.
Okay.
I said, thanks for inviting me.
Oh, okay. I missed that on the thing. Hopefully the tape picked it up. But anyway, maybe you can give me a little bit of background. I mentioned the fact that you did some TV work. I believe you're now a film guy. Maybe you can give some background for the people who may not be familiar with your work.
All right. So I founded Exopolitics Germany on June 1st, 2007. We have a couple of thousand members now and a couple of hundred paying activists who actively participate, who support us financially, both financially and with stories. Quite a lot of them come from there are quite some scientists among them, you know. Not all of them want to go public with what they know and what they think is real when it comes to UFOs, but they use exopolitics as some kind of platform to get in touch with other people who have an informed opinion on this. I myself, I had started work as a journalist or becoming a journalist when I was 16 years old, writing news stories for local newspapers. Started working in the TV business, and around 10 years ago I quit. I stopped working for the mass media because I thought because I found out it's not the proper place to report on things which are potentially mind-boggling,
Yeah.
which are interesting for people to know, which could really change something. So that is why in 2007 I decided to found Exopolitics in Germany and to use it as a platform to publish reliable information on mostly UFOs, but also subjects like free consciousness research.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Does the German TV treat the UFO subject the same as they do here, with the little laugh at the end of the whole story and fairly negative?
Well, I would say that they would treat it even worse because in the United States or in Canada, I don't know how they treat it in Canada though. But I mean, in the States, they know at least that their own government has had an official UFO study ongoing for a couple of years, even though officially they stopped researching it because they had no results. Still, there is the fact that the government at one point in time had officially been interested enough the subject to research it. Whereas here in Germany, people don't know anything at all about UFOs. The only thing you read on the mass media is like, 50th anniversary of Roswell, pilgrimage of alien fans coming together again, all the crazy folks, and when you read something on the mass media about UFOs, it's usually something like ufology is dead. All the interest that had come up in the 50s is now dying with the old ufologists because they're 50 because it's been so long, and nowadays nobody really cares, and there's no interest whatsoever coming from the mass media.
Wow. Do you get stories? One of the questions I want to ask you before we get to the FOIA story, do you get stories there of mutilations, crop circles, abductions, that kind of stuff?
Well, in the mass media, you don't hear anything on this.
Okay.
There's only alternative websites, of course, who translate where stories are translated from American websites or other countries, but you usually don't hear or read or see anything about this on TV.
Do you get anything like in case of German stuff, like to your own sort of research network of those kind of stories taking place in Germany, like crop circles or abductions or?
Yeah, there was a great fascinating crop formation last year in Bavaria, and it kind of attracted the attention of a couple of news outlets. But their style of reporting was the usual thing, it's just a crazy bunch of people who think this is where an alien ship had landed, and now they gathered there to worship the alien masters coming to.
Wow.
Stuff like that.
That's pretty conservative.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Wow. What do you attribute that to?
Well, that's an interesting question, and since I've worked in mass media myself, I have to tell you that this is all due to a conspiracy going on, secrets, agents infiltrating news outlets. I think it's just a matter of archiving. I think mostly, for the most part, I have to say. The thing is, if you are a journalist and you work in a daily news organization, or you work on television, and you usually go there at 9 a.m. and you have friends, and you're being told what to report on that day, and then that gives you around, let's say, 4 to 5 hours at max to get all the information you need to report on it. And to find news images, you can use some outside production company to go there and do an interview with someone that they would send you. So you don't really have time to focus on the news itself. You're really dependent on what your news archive says on the subject, and what your if there's any footage previously shot by some other journalist or by some other cameraman. So you don't really have time to report on it. And if there's no reliable information in your whole news archive of your news organization, then you will easily dismiss that. And also, there's UFOs news coming to a German news outlet or TV channel, they usually get it from news networks like Reuters or DPA, which is the German press agency. And if the information provided by that news agency itself is already redacted in a way which makes you think that's a foolish idea, UFOs and stuff, there's hardly anybody who has a say in what news to report who will say, okay, we will publish that, we will write on this, And I found a couple of news articles coming from news networks like DPA, for example. There's one specific article, where I think that where I have the opinion that this is disinformation, actually.
Okay.
You know. So it's difficult to say, you know. It's really difficult to say. I know that most of my former colleagues, they wouldn't, if they become aware of the facts, they would get really interested, but they don't get aware of the facts because they don't deal with it.
So your personal work, so your anything that you put out in video or stuff like that, do you have any traction inside the country, or are you basically talking to a foreign audience?
No, well, I would say I would say that Exopolitics Germany has become quite an important platform in the whole German-speaking world, like Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. I think most people who are interested in UFOs have heard of Exopolitics Germany, and they watch our videos. We have a very successful YouTube channel. We have a bi-monthly TV magazine coming out, which is called Exo Magazine. You can watch it on the internet. And this is where we report on newest developments, but also edge sciences, all kinds of stuff that's interesting to free spirits, open-minded people.
Wow.
So yeah, I would say that Exopolitics Germany has become quite important during the last couple of years.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'll link some of that stuff up so that people can get into some of the work that you've done. Let's get to the story that I sort of I caught on the internet that you had put out, and that has to do with the sort of the story on the Freedom of Information Act in Germany. Can you basically give us an idea of the background when the act came in, and then maybe get into the story of sort of your interaction with this law and where it's going, or where it's not going?
Sure. So if you look at Germany, when in terms of government transparency, and especially when it comes to UFOs, you know, you will find that Germany is literally like the black spot on the map. Like, I've done some research. You know, I'm a conference interpreter. I speak a couple of languages, so that allows me to go to Spanish or Italian or Portuguese websites and to do some research. And I also, of course, being an interpreter, I have a network of people who speak other languages I don't speak personally. So I've done some research, and I made up a list of 20 countries worldwide that have been dealing very seriously with the UFO subject, had been dealing or have been dealing with it. Some of them have official authorities, official government bodies who deal with the subject, and that is, you know, and that list alone would make any German journalist suspicious about the official government position, because unlike in 20 other countries, including our neighboring country France, you know, they have been investigating UFOs officially for 30 years, and that's just the country next to Germany, you know. Unlike all those countries, Germany insists that there is no such thing as UFOs, and the German military has never captured even one interesting thing on their radar screen. And
do they officially say this?
Yes, that's what they officially say. When you make a request,
okay.
We did that several times. They said at no point in time since the foundation of the German Bundeswehr, which is German military, have we registered any object which could not eventually be fully identified or something.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's just ridiculous if you think that, you know, I came across some radar recordings from Switzerland. Actually registered UFO activity over, you know, because their radar station is just quite near the German border, so it kind of covers parts of the German territory, and there is proof that there is UFO activity over German territory, and the Swiss military even the Swiss have registered it, but the German military claims they have not.
Wow.
So
Okay.
So what is going on in Germany? If you asked our former Minister of the Interior, Wolfgang Schäuble, he was asked that question if there is any authority or institution that deals with sightings of unidentified flying objects. In 2008, he answered that question, and he said that there is no federal authority or institution that registers or deals with sightings of unidentified flying objects. Said an authority or an institution on the federal level that deals with alleged sightings of unidentified flying objects is not known here. That's what he actually said in German. So that's an interesting thing he said, because he doesn't say it doesn't exist. He says he doesn't know of any.
Okay.
So and that kind of made me curious. And then in 2009 we had the chance to get an insight into draft written by the Scientific Research Service of the German Bundestag. So the German Bundestag, that's the German federal parliament, they have their own scientific research service, which is there to help deputies of the Bundestag to fulfill their duties as deputies. If they have a scientific question or whatever, legal question, they refer to that scientific research service and they will come up with a draft explaining all of this.
Okay.
So one deputy of the German Bundestag, she commissioned the scientific research service to elaborate on the question why United Nations Resolution A33426 from 1978, that's the one where the General Assembly invited all interested to conduct on a national level UFO research and to let the Secretary General know about the results. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yes.
And she commissioned the Scientific Research Service to elaborate on the question why that resolution or United Nations decision was actually never implemented in Germany. And so we got hold of that draft, and it's a quite interesting paper because in parts it really does contradict the official government position on UFOs, because it says, and I hope I've translated that correctly, and that's just one quote from the draft. It says, "The fact that both Great Britain and France have been dealing with the question of whether or not UFOs and extraterrestrial life forms exist, and have even published their formally classified reports on the internet in the last few years, suggests that German authorities or ministries have dealt or have been dealing with that question too."
Wow.
And they go on to state that especially during the Cold War, this was would have been more than obvious to deal with that question, because unidentified flying objects could have very well been spy planes or drones from the political enemy, So that's that's a very good reason to deal with unidentified flying objects. And if you look at the Stasi files now, Germany, as you know, Germany became reunited in 1989. So that was the western part of Germany and East Germany. And I was actually born in East Germany, so I know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
We had this Eastern German secret service, which was called Stasi. It's literally translated, that's state security.
Okay.
And they had UFO files. We have a body here, an official authority that kind of deals with the remnants of the archive of that state secret Stasi. And there was one journalist who made an inquiry there if there's anything concerning UFOs. And and they came up with a couple of pages detailing several UFO sightings. And what you can read in those documents is that the Stasi, former Eastern German Secret Service, took that phenomenon at least seriously enough to deal with it, to conduct investigations and so on. So,
how many pages of Stasi files were there?
I think it's a dozen, 10 or 12 pages of what I have.
Okay.
It's not so much, and concerning concerning real phenomena, it's not very exhaustive. So.
Was it classified type stuff, or was it?
Well, of course. There was no such thing as freedom of information in East Germany.
Yeah, but did it have like a top secret or like some sort of?
No, not top secret. Oh, I would have to have a look at it.
Yeah.
If you give.
Sure.
But as far as I remember,
Yeah.
those were not classified as a top secret or something.
Okay.
Hang on. Stasi. Okay, so I have the files here. No, they say nothing about classified or anything.
Yeah. Okay.
No. So if you think about it, the Eastern German Secret Service had UFO files, and I'm sure that this is not the total of all the files they have. This is just what has emerged so far.
Sure.
And if you think that, especially at the time of the former Cold War, that the fact alone that there was the Cold War and that there was a political enemy with potential spy planes made several countries worldwide conduct UFO research, then it seems highly unlikely that in Germany, East Germany and West Germany being like the front line of the Cold War, that there was no UFO research undertaken by the government. How likely is that,
Exactly.
And that is that's exactly what the scientists, it's an astrophysicist and a political scientist who made up the draft from the Scientific Research Service, what they argue here, what they say here in that draft. So, how did it come to pass? How was it? Why is there now that legal procedure going on? Now, I first published the story in 2010, I think. I wrote an article. I made a video which is up on YouTube, has like more than 100,000 clicks now, I think.
Wow.
It's called UFOs and Politics. And one guy became interested. Many people became interested, of course, and they wanted to have insight in draft, and additional inquiries to the Bundestag and also to the specific deputy of the Bundestag, and of course they were denied access to that draft, so one of those. He started an FOIA request according to German law, and you need to know that the Freedom of Information Act in Germany is quite young. It's only been in place since January 1st, 2006.
Okay.
So that's a relatively new concept, and before that we had a word which is Amtsgeheimnis, which means something like official confidentiality. So if you worked in a government body, it was self-obvious that you would keep everything being said or being written there secret, confidential. That was like the main principle, the main line to follow when you worked for an authority in Germany.
Okay.
Suddenly you have this Freedom of Information Act in Germany. And so it's still taking some time, to become really effective. This Freedom of Information Act, it's only valid authorities, federal bodies, government bodies, but not for state authorities. And Germany is a federal republic. Germany, and 11 of them have their own freedom of information legislation. 5 of them have no freedom of information act at all.
Wow.
So it's really tricky being, if you're a journalist. I mean, okay, if you're a journalist and if you're registered with a press, with an official press body, or I don't know how you say it in English. I mean, if you have an official registered press card, which I have, you can always send that to, and it's not easy to get that in Germany. You can send that to a German authority, and they will have to answer you officially, or let's say normally they should answer you within, let's say, 3 days or so.
Wow.
But they don't, in the majority of cases, they always try to deny the information, to deny access to it, because it takes time, it takes money to do the research. So what I want to say is that German authorities in general are not fully adapted to what freedom of information actually means. What it needs to fulfill, to comply with the law, and that's also part of what's going on here. But in this case, back to that FOIA request from Frank Reitemeyer. That's the name of the guy. He lives in Berlin. He made an FOIA request. He wanted to see the UFO draft service of the Bundestag, and he was denied, and so he sued. He sued the administration of the Bundestag to gain access into that, and in the court of the first instance, administrative court of Berlin, on December 1st, 2011, actually said, yeah, you're right. You have the right to have a look into this draft. Now, the administration of the Bundestag, they can obviously so much transparency of government, and they appealed that decision.
Wow.
And what's going on now is that the next trial is going to take place on November 13, and the Bundestag administration is making sure by any means they have that they will win this trial, because they do not want anybody to gain access into any draft made up by those or any draft written by the Bundestag, because the whole thing now exceeds the question of whether or not the Germans know anything on UFOs, because it's a question. It's like a fundamental decision of whether or not drafts written by the Scientific Research Service of the Bundestag should be available to the public or not. And since the administrative court of the first instance in Berlin has decided that he has access to that draft, that actually caused a whole bunch of journalists and historians and people alike to go to the administration of the Bundestag and to call upon them and to want access to files written by the Scientific Research Service. For example, our former Minister of Defense, zu Gutenberg, that was his name. He made a dissertation, and then word came out that the Scientific Research Service had, diplomatically speaking, contributed to his dissertation by providing him several scientific analysis. So he had actually, it seems like he has used those drafts written by the scientists to make up his own dissertation and to become a doctor zu Gutenberg.
Wow.
That's for example one question that's at stake here. How many doctor titles are at stake at the German Bundestag among deputies?
Yeah.
You could easily find out if you had access to all the scientific drafts from the research service. And also, there was another journalist who wanted to know how many of the German Bundestag have received more than 5 smartphones and iPads from the Bundestag administration. And they all refer to that fundamental court decision from December 1st, 2011, when the Administrative Court of Berlin said that drafts written by the scientific are free to the public. You see, wow. So this is a fundamental issue. The Bundestag administration does not want the scientific research service from public access. That's it.
Wow.
Now, in order to make sure that the UFO file remains closed, they have commissioned an international law firm, a celebrity law firm, you could say, which may very well cost tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of euros. They have even commissioned a professor of law to write a legal expertise of whether or not service is open to the public, and they deny any comment on how much it costed, or they don't want to answer anything on this. And this is, I mean, if you think about it, at first they use taxpayers' money to make up a report on UFOs. I think this is a good thing. However, there are many journalists who say this alone is a scandal, but I'm sure this is a good thing. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
But then they use taxpayers' money to keep this draft written from keep them from the taxpayers' eyes, And then they even have a legal advisor, a legal person, a legal expert writing up a legal expertise on why that draft financed by the taxpayers' money from the taxpayers. So this is just outrageous, and I just can't believe that this is what they call freedom of information in Germany. And they have a quite interesting view on freedom of information in Germany. They say in that legal expertise, which I have, by the way, they write. Hang on, I will give you that quote. They say, I mean, what you read in there, does not sound at all like a constitutional democracy. It says the deputies of the German Bundestag, also like those of other parliaments, can not only, but instead are permitted and must to some extent even have an information advantage as opposed to the citizens, and it is broadly to their duty if and to what extent they leave this information advantage.
Wow.
And this is, we have a basic law, the Grundgesetz, which is the German Constitution, Article 20, where it says that all powers of the state devolve from the people.
Yeah.
How can you? Also, you need to know that the Federal Commissioner for data protection and freedom of information had his say on TV after this UFO decision was taken. Said, so he's the guy where you can complain when government authorities, government bodies don't fulfill their legal duties under the Freedom of Information Act. Okay, so he's a very important person. Like he's an official. Okay, he's the official German federal Commissioner for Freedom of Information, and he spoke out and he said, in the Parliament, it is nonetheless a matter of making the basis for decisions as transparent as possible, and that also means that expert opinions which have been commissioned in the research service, which are financed by the taxpayers' money, that this information is made available to the public and the citizens.
Wow.
However, as you see, the administration of the Bundestag can obviously not handle so much transparency in government.
It appears you may just open a huge door for everybody to walk through if this goes in your favor.
Well, it was not me, to be precise. It was Frank Reitemeyer, Frank, right, from Berlin, because I was, the way I learned about this upcoming trial in December 2011, I was actually quite surprised, that the draft that I had quoted from and that I had reported on a year before had eventually gained so much public interest that it now, had even caused a legal trial, to take place. So I actually met him. I first met him at the court building,
Okay. And what's his interest? Is he interested in UFOs, or is he just interested in freedom of information?
Well, he's interested in both. He's very interested in all kinds of edge sciences and UFO research. He's also someone you would call in German. There's a word for this. It's Querdenker. Someone who doesn't take the very first appropriate thought to be thought. He has his own mind. He thinks through things very thoroughly, and he also compares information, and so he's a very critical, skeptical-minded person. He wants to know why is it that in Germany there is no such thing as UFOs officially. Okay. He wants to know that.
Okay.
And this is not the only thing he deals with. He's also interested in many other subjects, but this is one of his favorite subjects.
And where does the money come from? You're up against big money on the other side. Do you have money? Does Frank have money to push this issue?
No, actually, he has no money to push this issue at all. The thing is that he is dependent on legal cost assistance. So the thing is that even if you have no job and you think that in Germany no job and you think that there's a thing that should be decided at the court, you can go to the court and ask for legal cost assistance, and then a judge will decide upon whether this cost assistance is allowed or not.
So
it's only allowed if the thing itself promises to be successful. So he has the legal cost assistance because the court said that okay, this is a thing that you should and we'll pay for it.
Okay, so he's got a good lawyer or just an average lawyer? Working for him.
Well, it's not up to me to judge on this. I would say this is this is not like it's a lawyer you can go to when you have legal cost assistance. It is certainly not a lawyer like the lawyers from the Bundestag, like this international celebrity law firm.
Yeah, it's not really a balanced playing field. It's not, here we call it legal aid, where you get people who've, but they're not, your high-priced lawyers who are, there. Yeah. Okay.
So Frank has actually has now lost almost any hope at all that he will ever see the UFO document by the research service, because he received the legal expertise, the legal opinion of that legal expert, and he has no money to give to anybody to commission a counter report or something, or counter legal opinion, a second expert opinion. So the whole issue is already decided upon, and that the issue has, so to speak, run its course, and they already have the judgment in the bag,
And this is coming down when? November
13.
13.
Right.
Have you gotten any input from, say, Danny Sheehan or Steve Bassett, or is there any comments or advice coming from outside the country?
No, no, not at all.
Wow. It
I
sounds.
mean, I have the impression that there's very few interest from outside the country. I mean, especially from the U.S. Concerning UFOs in Germany. There is lots of interest from other European countries, of course. You know, we have this Euro network. My friends there help me with translations.
Yeah.
Francisco in Portugal. You know, and we also have a Spanish subtitles, Portuguese. So I think in Europe we are quite closer.
Wow.
When it comes to that. Yeah. So that video, the video report that you talked about that attracted your interest, has already subtitles in several languages now.
Wow. What about media? You're expecting media to be watching the results of this decision?
I do expect media to watch that decision because, especially for journalists, this is a quite an interesting and important subject. You know, it's not for them. It's not so much about what's written in in this UFO document. It's more about the question of whether or not they will have access to the drafts written by the Scientific Research Service, because that would open a whole door of invaluable, precious information, which you could very well use as a journalist for your work. You know, and even the first trial has gained a lot of publicity, lots of interest from the mass media. And I'm already in touch with a couple of former colleagues and other journalists. So I'm sure that this upcoming trial will attract a lot of interest.
Wow.
And I hope so, because I think that what we need now is also some kind of public pressure, you know, the attention of the public concerning the whole UFO issue. Because if you think about it, you know, the Peruvians, they have just reopened their UFO authority, you know, dealing with UFOs, because obviously because it's important to their interests, to national interest or whatever, you know, national security, who knows, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Germany, it's like the second biggest export nation in the world, or third, not sure. It's like Germany is like Germany likes to see itself as the motor of the engine that keeps the European Union running, you know, with our front lady Angela Merkel. And Germany likes to be like the role model, you know. It always likes to present itself as the role model of international, you know, financial aid or whatever, you know, when it comes to third world countries, how much money we're giving, all of that, you know. Look at Germany. Think of it, you know, that even in Chile and Peru, you have better access to UFO files than you have in Germany, you know.
Of course, you guys are just starting, though. I mean, it's like, I always talk about disclosure, that it's not something, people think it's sort of like, if you do the right thing and file the right papers or say the right thing, it's suddenly going to come. But if you take a look at any sort of social or political movement, it usually takes 20 or 30 or 40 years to be hammering away at it, and then suddenly everybody just sort of gives up and it comes through. And I think, win or lose, I think you guys have made some, or especially Frank, has made a significant breakthrough where you've got media watching, and it comes down to the idea of, does the public have a right to know about what's going on for stuff that they're paying tax money for?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty significant what's happening here. I just sort of hope CNN picks it up. I mean, I'll do what I can to put it out there, but you know, this is you are a major player. It's like, you know, you almost look at the big three. It's like United States, China, and Germany. So it's not like some little tiny country that nobody knows. This is Germany where this is happening. So hopefully it gets picked up in the United States, and this issue of you know, freedom of information and what people deserve to know gets out. And it's kind of significant that it's the UFO issue that is sort of spearheading this sort of demand for information, that everybody, it sort of makes it look like almost like a legitimate subject because it's at this high level court where they're going to make a decision on this.
Right, right. And this is an issue, after all, this is an issue, this is about civil rights, this is about a very fundamental right, that freedom of information, has been recognized by the United Nations, by UNESCO and other experts, and international bodies as a fundamental human right,
Wow.
So why is it that the German Bundestag administration refuses and keeps refusing access to scientific reports drafted by the Scientific Research Service? I mean, the struggle of the administration of the Bundestag against transparency in government makes democracy in Germany look pretty old, know.
Yeah. Unreal. One of the things, we'll leave this because we're getting close to the end here, but one of the things I discussed with you before was this issue about files, that we have the same problem in Canada, the States, or whatever, that, huge numbers of files. You take a look at the Roswell thing, that, they go back and say all these files are missing and stuff like that. And I mentioned to you that I'd like your comment on this idea about World War II files. And if we go back to files that I really didn't know until you sort of spoke about it, was that some of these files may actually be in American hands. Can you talk about the influence on files and also the influence of the American government on Germany in terms of what happens inside Germany?
Okay, so this is actually a delicate question. The question of German sovereignty. It had been discussed only in conspiracy theory forums or something, and just until recently, until our former Minister of the Interior, Wolfgang Schäuble, said at the European Banking Congress in 2011, and he said, I quote, "At no point in time has Germany regained its full sovereignty after May 8, 1945.
Wow.
What does it mean? What does it mean exactly? And we've seen that now just recently when the Edward Snowden documents came out, and when it became known that America is actually spying on its allies, and that Germany is among the countries that they spy most upon, which is really interesting because since or after World War II, Germany has become, especially West Germany, has become, I would call it, an entire American military base. There are 23 U.S. military bases in Germany, more than 600 U.S. military facilities in Germany, with a total of around 60,000 troops. Great Britain also has 20,000 troops here, so it's like the second biggest, or the second country in the world with most U.S. troops. I don't know if there's any. I think maybe Afghanistan or Iraq is where they have more. And this, the fact that there's so many U.S. Military troops here, is also due to the fact that Germany plays a vital role in the NATO thing,
Okay.
So what does Schäuble mean? Gained its full sovereignty. Well, when the Edward Snowden documents came out, experts from the Bundesnachrichtendienst, that's the German Secret Service, they said, well, if the NSA, we are so implicit, or how do you say that? We are so, he said, we are so bound to the NSA, what they tell us, and to the CIA, that if they would cut the line, we would be blind.
Wow.
That's what they said. That's what they said. So Germany is actually so dependent and has become so much a part of this NATO intelligence military organization that you can hardly, if you call it a sovereign state. I think that is what he meant. Also, think of the European Union, where legislation is decided upon at the European Union level, and then kind of adapted into national law by the German Bundestag. So it's really difficult. the whole question of sovereignty. And when it comes to UFOs, you asked me about the files. When it comes to the files, you need to know that there is one article I can talk about because I did research there. That's the German Foreign Office's political archives in Berlin. That's where if you want to find anything on German there, you may find it or not. The majority of those files, I mean, this archive dates back to 1872 or something with Bismarck. You know,
Okay.
I mean, this is should be quite exhaustive. Should be quite full of documents. However, the majority of those files pertaining to that political archives of the German Foreign Office, Federal Foreign Office, were confiscated after World War II by the Allies. They were brought to Great Britain and were evaluated there, and then the files were brought back to Germany, but in several stacks. Like they had reopened the German political archive in 1951, and that is when only a tiny portion of the original files were available to the public. And then the Allies brought more and more files back. But not all of them. There seem to be files missing, and the files that had been confiscated by the Russians after World War II were only returned to Germany after the reunification in 1989.
Wow.
So you cannot say it's a complete archive of everything that's going on there. You know. So. I did some research in that archive concerning the United Nations Resolution 33426 and what they said about it, and I really did find one file which at least mentions this United Nations decision, and the Germans did everything they could together with the United States and Austria to prevent this the original proposal from Sir Eric Gehry to be adopted, you know, because he had wanted an expert group at United Nations level to be charged with investigating UFOs and all of that. And I mean, if you think about it, you know, it's like the most logical thing you can come up with. I mean, you know, if once you understand that the UFO subject is real and that there's craft flying around showing that, you know, that are just way better than what we have, you know, maneuvers and all of that, you know, if you are, that this is some kind of intelligence behind the phenomenon, you know, then which place would be the best authority to deal with that? I mean, it's obviously the United Nations, and they didn't want that, you know.
Yeah.
So they tried everything they could and to prevent it. And there was one file missing, actually. You know, I tried to access. I asked for a certain file there, which said preparations for the General Assembly, and it should have contained more documents on United Nations Decision 33426, but this file was actually unavailable, and that was even surprising for the archivists there.
Yeah, she made some comment. What was the comment she made to you?
Yeah, she said, I don't know how to translate that in German. She said, das haben sie kassiert. So kassiert, it's like they've taken it away on purpose. That's what it means, but it's not the literal translation.
Yeah.
I don't know how to translate that, but this is, it seemed to me like, you know, the expression on her face and the way she said it, you know, it looked to me as if this kind of thing rarely ever happens. But there may have been some rumors about files missing that they had taken away, but that she personally had never actually come across a file that was missing, but she had just heard rumors of her colleagues.
Wow.
And this was so this is one of the files they took away. This is the way how she said it.
Wow, very interesting.
But this there can be billions of reasons for that. To assume that this is because there's things about UFOs in there, is one of the less probable explanations. I don't know, but. Yeah.
Yeah, I found with the archivists too, they're sort of like historian type people, and people think they're covering up, but I don't think they are. I think they're just interested, and from time to time they will let stuff like that slip, like they realize that they're not dealing with all the stuff that they should be dealing with. And the cover up is taking place at another level. So let me ask you just final two questions here.
Right.
I just put out an article called UFOs, What Does the President Know? It's probably the question that's asked to me as sort of the presidential historian, is the president in charge? Is there a secret government? So let me ask you, Chancellor Angela Merkel, does she know what's going on? Or is somebody else running the country?
Well, I don't know, and let me come back to the quote from a former Minister of the Interior, Wolfgang Schäuble, who said that an authority dealing with UFOs is not known here. That's what he said, and he may very well be right saying that, because as several UFO cases have shown, especially one that took place I think it was in the state of Baden-Württemberg. There was a pilot that met a UFO in midair, and they didn't collide, but the UFO kind of followed that plane and circled around the plane, and the pilot had to call Mayday, Mayday, and then he safely landed on an airport aided by U.S. military intelligence on German soil. So that makes me think, and also the whole thing I discussed before, the contribution, Germany's contribution to NATO and the important role of U.S. military troops on German soil, makes me think that when it comes to UFOs, that German authorities may have some procedures, some plans, some regulation to pass it on to the Americans. And in fact, we came across, or a friend of mine, he's also a journalist, he's the publisher in Switzerland, a good friend of mine, and he did some research, and he found out there's actually a confidential agreement between federal authorities and federal states which says that UFO occurrences or any strange occurrences in the sky have to be reported to a certain military facility, which is which is something like a command center or command center for security in aviation, which is a joint military civil installation, and it belongs to NATO, of course.
Wow.
And another friend of mine who's a journalist who works for a very, very news organization in Germany, that kind of size of a news organization where if you call the press office of some government authority and you say who you work for, they wouldn't happily deny information, because they know it can have severe consequences. So he called the press office of the German Ministry of Defense and asked him about this, and said so there seem to be UFO files at that NLFZ, that military installation. And the press officer said, okay, I will call them, can release some. And he called them, and then he called the journalist back, and he told him, well, it's true that UFO sightings are being reported to that command center, but the officials there assured me that if they receive UFO reports, they immediately destroy the reports and throw them away.
There you go.
So that's kind of, that's, if you think of this, it's kind of interesting thinking about that there is like a confidential agreement between federal authorities and federal states saying that UFO reports must be sent to that facility, and when you call them, they say, yeah, we receive them, but we throw them away. I mean, and even especially because this command center for security in the airspace, they are responsible for investigating anything that could endanger security in airspace. So how can they do their job without even investigating? I mean,
exactly.
It's just a mere contradiction.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Second last question. Maybe make this short, and you may not know. America, we're always talking about black budget programs. Does Germany have black budget programs working on technology for aerospace, aviation, or whatever?
Well, I'm sure they have. I'm sure the military have their military projects, but I'm not aware. I'm personally not aware of any black project myself, and any technology emanating from that.
Okay, yeah, because that's big in the United States. Everybody seems to really know about it and acknowledge that, how much money is being spent on it and this kind of stuff. Last question. If you get disclosure, if disclosure does happen, if suddenly you get sort of a break in this case or something happens where the information can't be controlled and it suddenly becomes aware that ETs are visiting the Earth, how do you think the German citizens will react?
The German citizens, well, I think the Germans will. You mean how they will react to the extraterrestrial visitors coming here? I think the first thing they will do is to set up some rules. Don't land on my lawn. Terrestrials have to go to that authority and register officially, and make sure they fill out their income tax papers and stuff. I'm sure that this is like one of the first things that Germans will do.
Wow. Yeah. See, those are some of the questions I never thought about until I saw this story on Germany. I'm thinking this is a big culture and it's different than here. I just, wondered about all these sort of things. And so, you've cleared up an awful lot for me today. And I appreciate your, candor and your expertise. And let's hope something happens next month. I'll do what I can. And, I'll talk to Steve about this and see, maybe we can get some sort of cooperation from groups around here to sort of advertise what happens, because I think it's a significant case. And thank Frank for me. He probably doesn't speak English, but thank him for this and tell him that there are people watching. And I think it's significant, and I congratulate everybody who worked on this to move it to where it is right now. And I think it's a step towards disclosure. And I'm very thankful you guys have done this.
Okay, thank you for your interest. Thank you.
Okay, Robert, thank you, and have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.